Camille Josephine Billops was born on August 12, 1933, in Los Angeles, California. Her mother, Alma Gilmore, who worked as a domestic and seamstress, was originally from South Carolina. Her father, Lucius Billops, worked as a cook, originally from Texas, but he drank heavily. While Camille's parents worked for a Beverly Hills family, they put Camille through a private Catholic school, prim, proper, and black middle-class tailored. When Billops was 22, she met a lieutenant in the Air Force named Stanford. In a 1996 interview with Bell Hooks, Billops said that she loved Stanford because he was fine. But a few months into their relationship, she discovered that she was pregnant. Alma, Billops' mother, had taught her two daughters, Camille and her sister, Billy, that womanhood was tied to motherhood. But at the age of 10, little Camille Billops had decided she didn't want to be a mother. So when she found herself both unwed and pregnant, later, it came as a blow. This is in 1955, a very, very heavy burden for a single soon-to-be mother. Though she had not previously been interested in motherhood, she had made peace with the idea of following the traditional path of motherhood and marriage with Stanford. Billops and Stanford became engaged. Plans were made. 500 invitations were printed up, but none would be sent. Stanford disappeared. Billops called around looking for him, but when she contacted the Air Force Base, they informed her that he had been discharged. Then, her baby girl, Krista Victoria, was born. Billops' mother, Alma, helped raise Krista, while Billops tackled the demands of working at a bank during the day and going to school at night. Instead of learning Mama, Krista was taught to call Billops Bootsy. In 1959, Billops was working as a teacher and creating ceramics in her spare time. One day, her stepsister Josie told Billops about this tall, white, handsome professor, James V. Hatch, in the theater department at UCLA. Josie nudged Billops to ask him out, and when the opportunity presented itself, or was created, Billops asked Hatch to come by to look at her ceramic pots. Hatch loved her ceramic work. Then something happened. He struck something in her. It was the first time anyone had viewed her work she created as art. As exciting as this all was, there was a catch. This new man who was open to her, who saw her, was married with 2 children. In 1960, Billops graduated with a BA from Los Angeles State College, known today as California State University, Los Angeles, or locally as Cal State LA, where she majored in education for physically handicapped children. Early one morning, shortly after receiving her BA, 27-year-old Billops went to her mother's house to pick up her 4-year-old daughter, Krista. When Billops walked into the house, she found herself in the middle of an intervention. Several of the female members of Billops' family gathered in this house to dissuade Billops from giving Krista up for adoption, with each woman throwing in her bid to step in and take over Krista's care. But Billops wasn't interested in having her family members take over. She felt her mother was too old, and Billops didn't trust her sister's husband. I'm not sure why she disqualified the other family members, but Billops took her daughter, left her mother's house, and drove to the Los Angeles Children's Home Society of California. While there, Billops told little Krista to use the bathroom inside, and when Krista returned, looking for her mother, she saw her mother's black Volkswagen Beetle driving away. Months after Krista's abandonment, Billops' new love interest, Hatch, received a Fulbright appointment in Cairo, Egypt, to teach at the Higher Cinema Institute. It was one of the first institutions of its kind in the Middle East and Africa and had been recently established in 1957. According to an article in Topic by Sasha Bonet, Before his wife and children joined him in Cairo, Hatch invited Billops out for a visit. She did visit, but told him she would not be back unless he left his family. Hatch chose Billops, and indeed left his family, and in 1962, she joined him in Egypt and lived there with him for years. The year Billops joined Hatch in Egypt was the same year she had her first show at Gallery Akhenaten in Cairo. Around this time, Billops began to sculpt more than just pots. She experimented with painting, photography, and printmaking, and with the encouragement of Hatch, eventually dove into filmmaking. Aside from Egypt, she showed her work in other countries, including China and Germany, before returning to the United States, planting roots in East Village in New York City. Hatch landed a position as a theater teacher in City College of New York. Billops taught ceramics and worked towards an MFA at City University of New York, and graduated in 1975. In the 70s and 80s, it was extremely hard for Black women artists to get recognition and exhibitions, not just in New York, but throughout the country. In response, many formed groups and created collectives to create their own platforms outside of the mainstream art world. Billops was among the many Black women in collectives who banded together to recognize themselves and each other. Billops and Hatch used their small loft as a venue to host shows and sell work. In the early 80s, Billops and Hatch moved to a larger loft and began to build up an archive library, open to their peers, students from City College, historians, curators, and gallerists. A lot was going on in the 80s, though. Not only were Billops and Hatch moving and building on their legacies, but they officially got married. Her work also began to shift, focusing more on biographical themes. For example, in 1982, Billops produced a short documentary titled Suzanne, Suzanne, a film about her niece's heroin addiction. In 1986, she exhibited work at Calkins Gallery at Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. In 1987, Billops produced a short film titled Older Women and Love. One day, in 1980, Billops received an envelope containing a cassette tape. It was from Krista Victoria, now 24. Krista's adoptive mother, Margaret Liebig, was a jazz singer from Oakland, California, and had encouraged Krista to reach out to Billops for answers and closure. On the tape Billops received was a song Krista had composed for Billops, Asking to Meet. Of course Krista would be an artist, Billops thought. It's in her blood. Billops did not jump at the idea immediately. She had learned to live with her shortcomings as a mother and had dulled the pain. But after thinking on it, it came to her to turn this experience into a documentary. Perhaps this was Billops' way to cushion the anticipated emotional blows. The documentary that came from this reunion is titled Finding Krista. The title is misleading because it was actually Krista who found Billops. It's a 55-minute documentary filled with home video footage from Billops' parents, interviews, reenactments, and theatrical interludes. In the film, family members are interviewed who express their theory that the reason Camille gave Krista up was because of Billops' affair with Hatch. Krista's adoptive mother, Liebig, is also interviewed and has been reported as being one of the most sympathetic people in the documentary. Billops herself has admitted to coming across as a little cold and unapologetic, while Krista reads as open and forgiving of her mother. Included also are songs sung by Krista as well as Liebig singing Because You're Mine and Stormy Monday. The film was released in 1991, and in 1992 it won the Grand Jury Prize at the Sundance Film Festival in the documentary category, making Camille the first and only Black woman producer and director ever to be given the award at that time. In a 1992 article in the Boston Globe, Camille was quoted as saying, "Whatever our relationship becomes over the years, it is something that has to be worked at very hard. We live quite separate lives. Our contact is very casual because there is still a perception of abandonment that will never be resolved. It is not simple, and it's not without pain. There are days when I think, what did I do this for? And days when I'm sure she thinks the same thing. This documentary is important to know because it would be the work that Billops was known for. It would be the work she would discuss continuously, even through her later battle with dementia until the end of her life. According to an article in the New York Times by Catherine Q. Seeley, off camera, Billops and Krista had a very complicated relationship, mixed with guilt and surprisingly inflamed by competitiveness. According to Billops, Krista was trying to take credit for the movie, and Billops barred her from attending the Sundance Awards ceremony, contrary to her husband's suggestion. Krista, however, had not received the closure and still longed to understand why she had been abandoned. Dion Hatch, James Hatch's son from his first marriage, commented on Billops and Krista's relationship. They were so much alike, two very headstrong people, both artists, he had said. Krista was always looking for a reason for why she was given up, and Camille was always trying not to have to deal with that. Dion said that Billops had at one point banned anyone from bringing up Krista's name, but then would spend hours talking about Krista herself. Unfortunately, sometime after the film, Billops stopped all communication with Krista, undeterred by Krista's appeals. This is heartbreaking. But despite Camille not talking to Krista, Jim continued to speak with, meet with, and support Krista on her path to becoming a professional musician, as an author, and as a friend. After the documentary Finding Krista, Billops went on to direct and produce 4 more films, a film titled The KKK Boutique Ain't Just Rednecks, another short titled Take Your Bags, a documentary titled A String of Pearls, and a short titled And That's the Way It Is. She also continued to show her sculptures and art at exhibitions, including an exhibition titled Still Raising Hell, The Art, Activism, and Archives of Camille Billops and James V. Hatch in Atlanta, Georgia. In 2016, Billops received a phone call bearing terrible news. It was a call about Krista. She was found dead in her Bronx apartment at the age of 59. Krista had suffered from heart failure after refusing to receive a necessary operation. According to Dion, Billops' stepson, it was Krista's death that sparked the rapid decline of Billops' health. On June 1st, 2019, Camille Billops died of complications from Alzheimer's disease. She and her husband, James Hatch, who passed away in March of 2020, at the age of 91, left behind a vast and important contribution of both reference materials and original works. The Billops Hatch collection can be found at the Camille Billops and James V. Hatch Archives at the Stuart A. Rose Manuscript, Archives, and Rare Books Library at Emory University.